Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, we'll start with like a little bit of news, and CCP announced that next week on Wednesday we'll get the April patch, which is called Surgical Strike if I'm not mistaken, and it's gonna be very interesting. It's definitely aiming to at nerfing like capitals and just across the board, making destruction much more common in fights in EVE Online, maybe even in PvE, because there is this 20% nerf to all resistance modules, which, well, for PvE, the Abyss and things like that, I think is already super important. So we'll see what the impact is there. I still personally need to like go through all the details of the dev blog to really make up my mind. I am personally a little bit worried about like armor again. I feel like that's already relying quite a lot on having at least some sort of resistance so that your repper can keep up with the cycles. And I don't know, I don't really know what is the argument for allowing shields to have both low and mid slots for shield improvements, and armor only the low slots. Maybe that's something that CCP will have to look into if it does turn out that armor fits basically suffer even more from that. For me personally, of course, I have been training into missiles, drones and shields as well lately, so I feel like, for instance, the rattlesnake, which will take a hit on resistances, will on the other hand take a buff for HP, so that should basically, I think, negate that, because a passive rattlesnake has just basically a very large shield pool, so that it can get that passive regen, and that should just improve with this. So those are my first thoughts on that announcement. I still need to go through the details myself. For capitals, this will be very interesting as well. Perhaps people won't use them anymore. Perhaps we will see more destruction. We'll see how it works out, of course. Another step that CCP is taking towards getting more destruction, and of course then, in my opinion, also more restricted resources, making people poor, basically, is the aim at the moment. Let's take a look at the new... Oh, maybe before that, in one of the previous video, people did ask me how I am doing. Personally, I'm doing very well, I would say. I'm not really struggling in any way. I'm used to being home alone, so all of that is just fine. Well, I'm working from home. We can actually do that, and I work in the financial sector, so there's actually a lot of work for me to get through, which actually means that I'm very busy, despite the fact that the whole world sometimes feels like it's at a standstill. But yeah, I'm doing absolutely fine, I would say, and we can keep going. Let's move on to the New Eden store then and take a look at that. If I'm not mistaken, we had some new skins. We also apparently have a sale, alright, for the Blackfire skins and Hostile Takeover skin, which are on sale. Alright, and then we get a new skin. I like it. Yellow and black. I think it's a great combination. Helmet's Harrier skin for the worm. I'm seeing the Gila and the rattlesnake as well. Ooh, that does look very attractive in my opinion. A little bit of... No, it's actually yellow. Yeah, man, this is nice. I really like this skin personally. It looks pretty damn cool. 250 plex for the battleship, 110 for the others. Actually feels reasonable in price as well. Ooh, and a sale on the Lava Core Imperial skins. Now, I don't fly these enough to really say, alright, I'm gonna buy these, but these are really great looking skins. So if you fly the Apocalypse and if you fly the Armageddon or any of those types of hulls, you get a chance to grab these for cheap, including the Capitals, Revelation, Aeon. I mean, that looks really nice as well. Quite a few sales. A bit of a surprise here. We don't usually see this many sales happening in the New Eden store, but here you have quite a bit of choice and a new skin as well, which in my opinion looks pretty great. That means that we are moving on to the markets, of course, and let's start with plex and stuff. It's gonna be at 435. like that. So let's get that plex chart going, and we basically stopped our descent when the average prices broke 3 million on the downside, and then we are flat for the last couple of days. So I think this is another attempt by the market to form the bottom. Will it work? Well, perhaps the good news of what's happening is that we are seeing more players online, almost 40,000 apparently at the peak last weekend. We'll see what we can manage this weekend. I'm definitely seeing high numbers in local and quite a bit of spam happening here as well. So maybe more players means more demand. You can imagine that people coming back might just do so as an alpha clone, just to take a look at the game, and if they then see somewhat affordable and definitely relatively low plex prices, they might just, you know, spend the ISK and increase demand for plex that way. When are we talking about in Cheetah? 3.2 million almost for the sellers, 3 million for the buyers. So I'm gonna assume that it goes on well. 3.2 million for the sellers as well in the player owned trade hubs, and then the buyers go up just a little bit above 3 million. So the average price went below 3 million, but we are getting back to that point very quickly, which I think makes sense, right? 3 million is an easy number to wrap your head around. Do that times 500, 1.5 billion for 30 days Omega, and you've got a pretty easy calculation with a price. If you look at this chart, that of course feels very reasonable. Now 1.5 billion is still decently expensive, but consider where we're coming from, and it does look like the right time to move in, especially if all you need to do is basically grab 500 plex to get those 30 days in, and maybe get you through this more difficult period in the greatest sandbox in EVE Online. After that, we take a look at the multiple pilot train certificates. Continuing the decline here, we don't see that much of a sign of a pullback or of stability. So the 5-day moving average still going straight through the 1.5 billion mark. And in fact, sellers are coming in at 1.5 and the buyers are coming in at just above 1.4 billion. That means that at this point, a multiple pilot train certificate is probably slightly cheaper than plex for 30 days Omega. Of course, this has some restrictions. It needs to be a second character on the account. I'm not sure if you need to have an Omega running. I'm assuming that you actually do. After that, our skill extractors, which do follow the plex bottom, forming a little bit better, I would say, below 350 million. Are we still there? It's 362 for the sellers and 334 for the buyers. So the buyers are lagging behind just a little bit, but if plex is any indication, I think that they will be forced up as well, back towards that 350 range. In fact, some, if you look at the non-green stuff, are already going up towards that 350. So we'll be recovering here at a 1 year low point though, and I think everyone that managed to buy plex well below 3 million, so basically this little part of the chart, and same with the skill extractors below 350, you are probably making a very good purchase there. Let's take a look at the impact on the skill injectors. Large skill injectors continuing that slow decline down to less than 800 million ISK. So still not really a sign that that this is stopping. And I'm actually going to have to intervene here, I think, because this is starting to look somewhat annoying. Can I... God damn it, I need even more stability. And can I block... Right click on them accidentally and then pilot block? That should slow things down a little bit. And then this guy, right, sorry about that guys, but yeah, this just pilot block. This was just a little bit ridiculous. Here's another one. Right click, block. All of that stuff is now gone, and that looks a little bit more reasonable. Jesus Christ, it was really starting to bother me. Alright, large skill injectors, well, they made it in EVE Talk, we're gonna say. So these large skill injectors continuing a slow decline, and now the sellers, 785 million ISK, buyers coming in at 753. We are substantially below the 800 million mark. Now, is this the exact same situation as plex, as skill extractors? extractors where this is basically a no-brain purchase? I would say no for a couple of reasons. Number one, of course, we can see on the chart that we have been here before, and number two, there is another aspect to the skill injectors that is not just the plex prices, but also of course the expected demand for skill points, for instance. And right now, considering that capital ships get a pretty big nerf, it could definitely be that you know, there's gonna be less demand for injections, for creating new Rorcal pilots, creating new carrier pilots, Titan pilots, things like that could have an impact longer term, I think, lowering the demand for actual skill points. CCP has also been very generous, of course. Let's see if we finally have them moving in tandem. Yes, finally. So we saw in the last couple of weeks that the small scale injectors actually were doing their own thing a little bit, but now we are landing on 160 million ISK and we're finally down in tandem with the large scale injectors. This makes a lot more sense. In fact, we've just broken through 157 million for the latest sellers, 152 million for the buyers. Bit less of a margin, I would say, compared to the large scale injectors here, although no, 785 to 753 feels very much in line. So here the symmetry has been restored, I think, on basically this downward pressure for the injectors in general. Then we still have the daily alpha injectors that are also going down back to less than 40 million ISK. It's now 39 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. I'm very surprised at how long we're able to stay at these relatively low prices if we look at where we started off on the chart. Another indication that demand for skill point might just be down a little bit in general in the game. After that, we've got the hypercores left that are struggling to get back to 350. They're right now at around 330 on the average price. 340,000 for the sellers, 300,000 for the buyers. Also showing a little bit less, I think, activity in the Hypernet relay right now. All right. Not that bad, I would say, and still definitely a buy opportunity in my opinion for the skill extractors, for instance. After that, we're moving on to the minerals. Those are coming in at 1140. As always, we'll start with titanium, and you may already have seen that from the ticker as well. After that incredible performance up to 10 ISK and more in the last week or so, we are giving back some ground, but we're staying above 9 ISK, at least for the sellers. That was the case. Let's take a look at the GTS sellers. 945 for the sellers and just below 9 ISK, 897 for the buyers. Still a very, very good price. I even spent a little bit of time mining last week, just getting the Orca out, grabbing some Veldspar asteroids and compressing that. It is a great time to be a miner, and of course, as a result, I think people are getting back into that activity, even if it means mining in HiSec at the moment. That is increasing supply, and so, you know, we're not going to continue to break records, even if CCP is going for shortages. You know, at some price point, there's going to be enough activity to create enough demand. Or enough supply, I should say. After that, we've got pyrite, and this is a little bit more dangerous, of course, going back down a little bit on the average prices, heading back for that 7 ISK range. It's still 782 for the sellers, 751 for one buyers, but then we go down to 701, actually within the sellers, what sellers can dump to in JITA itself. So there is a bit of pressure on pyrite, not entirely unexpected, of course, because pyrite is actually still a product that comes from moon mining as well. So we could expect pyrite and Mexalon to not move in tandem with titanium and the others. Let's take a look at that one then. Mexalon still doing really well, staying just below 70 ISK as the average price. It's 70.7 ISK for the sellers and 65 ISK for the buyers. Here again, we are seeing that margin opening up between sellers and buyers. 4 jumps out. There's still some aggressive ones, not that big in volume, so these will be gone pretty soon, and that does mean that I'm seeing both Mexalon and pyrite fall a little bit in price, although on the 1-year chart we can definitely see that we are doing quite well on both of them. Giving back a little bit of ground is not that bad. And then there's Isogen that's already falling back below 20 ISK right now, 20.07 for the sellers, but 1883, same pattern yet again here, falling down. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if there's still like isogen sources that are plentiful through moon mining or something like that, or is this just stocks, because isogen was the biggest casualty in the last couple of years during the abundance phase, you could say, of mining in EVE Online, and it is possible that there's just still so much isogen out there that at the moment this is just still super abundant. Another thing that I'm thinking of right now, isogen is actually a very important lore product, right? You've got Isogen 5 and stuff like that, that has often been at the forefront of special lore events. And looking at the trailer, we know that the Triglavians might be going after stars as well, which is where that Isogen stuff was produced. So who knows, perhaps this is a very long shot, but perhaps a gamble worth looking into. If Isogen falls back substantially enough, perhaps CCP will have an Isogen sink in the works when it comes to the events that are happening with the Eclipse part of the Triglavian storyline here. So something to think about, right? Isogen has always been at the forefront of whatever happens in lore. It is very, very cheap right now, and perhaps, you know, I've said for a pretty long time that if Isogen is going to make a real resurgence, it is going to be through a CCP intervention. Who knows, it might just happen. It's a big gamble, of course. Of that, we've got Noxium also continuing that slow decline. So at the moment, we are definitely seeing a bit of decline, perhaps in demand as well, due to the capital nerfs. That may just be a part of the explanation for the continued decline that we're seeing here. We're through the 350 mark, and at 340 for the sellers, 306 for the buyers. Again, a decent margin opening up. That is, continuing the pressure on some of these minerals. Tritanium basically being the only exception at the moment. After that, we've got Zydrine, that is, well, the other exception, continuing to climb up to 650 ISK, I think because of the moon mining changes. 655 in fact for the seller, much more reasonable price than the 500 range we've seen before. 606 for the buyers, decent margin, but forcing the sellers up above 600 is actually pretty impressive. So here, a great time to be producing Zydrine at the moment. And then we've got Megasite that is trying to hold on to 500 ISK, succeeding in the last couple of days, but sellers are still coming in quite massively. 498 for that, and 429, definitely a bigger margin as well. So here, Megasite still struggling to get that higher price. And then we've got Morphite that jumps up to a 1-year high point yet again. Here I'm thinking meta change with resistances becoming far more valuable. Tech 2 ships might become even more important and valuable as well. Capital ships and the destruction of Tech 1 ships, capital ships and things like that becoming far more relevant. I think Tech 2 may just take even more interest in the meta, and that could be an explanation why we jump up from a high point of 15,000 ISK where we've been at for over a month. We now jump to 18,500 ISK. Well, what the hell? That's, well, yeah, there you go. I thought it would be 20k, but no, we jump up to 18,500 ISK, another 3,000 ISK added on the sellers, 16,750, showing that there's definitely a demand side to this as well. So Morphite, 1-year high point, an incredible time to sell. And this is a crazy chart, of course. A year ago, you could have bought this for 7,500, and we were actually struggling for a very long time before that. I was always very hesitant, but should have made a move. And then it turns out that one sell opportunity at 12,500 was too early. Even 15,000 is too early. Now you can sell at 18,000. It's way more than double the price. For those that have been patient enough, this is definitely a great time to cash out on that Morphite trade. Now I'm gonna drink just a little bit before we move on to the next segment. Like that, try to keep the throat from being too dry, and that means we move on to the PI market at 18.45. Let's go through this one and see what's happening here. Broadcast nodes definitely coming back down to that lower end of the range. I'm gonna say less than 1.9 in a couple of the last days. 2 million for the sellers, 1.9, a little bit below that for the buyers. You can see supply coming back here as well. So maybe a little bit of oversupply after this peak here, but personally I'm expecting the fact that anyone that's been gambling on structure announcements is going to be disappointed at this point, and they may just decide to go into ISK rather than hold on to these advanced PI materials for much longer. And as a result, we might be getting that oversupply and those cheaper prices yet again. Construction blocks showing that we are continuing to struggle with demand a little bit, in my opinion. Less than 10,000 discs for a couple of sellers, less than 9,000 discs for the buyers. Supplies, you know, considering what we have to browse through, is still very plentiful compared to demand. Consumer electronics, at least we're forming a logical bottom, showing that there's still people looking at this stuff and willing to pick up the bargains. When we went to less than 8,800 disc here, I think people did decide that this is just too good to pass up. If we can buy close to 7.5, we're gonna do that, and that shows here the resurgence, but we're staying well below 10,000 disc on the buyer side, 8,700 in fact, 8,800, something like that. Seems to have been 8.7 was the target here on the chart. You can see that we managed to climb back, and as a result here sellers are still at 10,000 disc, which is very cheap if you look at this full chart of Jesus Christ, struggling a little bit here, just give me a moment. Still very cheap if you look at this one chart, definitely below average, showing yet again a lack of demand, although here the browsing starts to be a little bit more in line, basically because of course people have been picking up a lot of that cheap stuff down here. On the coolant markets, we're coming back a little bit. That would be good news for people that follow my advice of focusing production on fuel related PI materials. I have found those to be very stable, basically, with a more stable demand, which is why I focus on them mostly. Coolants is back to 13,500, almost 14,000 for most sellers, 12,500 for the buyers, back to in above average price. That is very nice, of course. Cryoprotectant solutions landing on 200,000 disc. We're talking 208 for the sellers, 199 for the buyers. Main reason I think for this strong performance, able to stay well away from the 100,000, basically double the price, is during this event yet another implant set has been introduced into the game that should really keep demand very high for cryoprotectant solutions. Enriched uranium next, tied to fuels, not doing that well, but look at this here. Definitely the low points 12,500, 13,500, probably the average for the year, pretty easily maintainable. Right now we're struggling at the tail end, but this has been a much more stable year than something like construction blocks, something like consumer electronics. So I'm still happy, I think, with this full 1 year chart. Right now, of course, well, 13,300, 14,000 for the sellers, that's still very reasonable. 11,800 for the buyers might just start to look like a bargain because you're buying below 12,000 disc. We'll see how long this lasts, of course. In the upcoming weeks we'll have to see if supply keeps crushing demand, but otherwise this is actually an opportunity for you to grab some cheap enriched uranium below 12,000 disc. The integrity response drones confirming the trend here in the advanced PI materials of going back to a less than average price. 2.3 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers, and you can see that the chart is moving close to those 2 million. So here again, my theory, people have been speculating on, well, perhaps we'll get a new structure here in the next chapter, in the next quadrant. Maybe it'll focus on structures and things like that, and as a result, now that we really don't see any signs of that, we've got a little bit of dumping happening to these buyers. So there is an opportunity to grab cheap ones as well. You know, someone's loss is someone else's gain potentially. Mechanical parts struggling to break back to that 11k, but we're staying well above 10,000 on the average price. 10,800 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers, showing that lack of demand, but I think that sellers are able to maintain a better price because this is again tied to fuels. Organic mortar applicators, after again that speculative bubble, I'm gonna start to call it at this point, try to resurge back to 1.05 million, but look at that 5-day moving average going back down. just above a million for the sellers, 945,000 for the buyers, and here average price well below a million. Same pattern yet again. Robotics is finally stopping its descent and staying above 85 on the average, 89,000 for the sellers, 83,000 for the buyers. The one fuel related material that is really struggling at the moment, probably 15-20% below its average price of around 100,000 ISK. So this is the one exception to my rule so far. For fuel-related PI materials, self-harmonizing power cores continuing to confirm the trend. You can see the volumes going down, interest going down in advanced PI materials, because no sign whatsoever that structure stuff is coming. And yeah, getting close to a 1-year low point. In fact, here less than 2 million for the sellers, less than 1.9 million for the buyers. Definitely a bit of bargain hunting happening at the moment here. Superconductors are one exception here as well, which I happen to produce. This is more luck than anything else, but yeah, staying above 15,000 ISK for the average, almost 16,000 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. I've sold all of my superconductors on this increased price, and those were the superconductors that I had been stocking up during this bad fall and winter. So very profitable to be patient on some occasions here. Demand seems to be really strong here, and I've made quite a bit of risk out of that. Test cultures is another one that is doing really well all of a sudden, managing to maintain high prices at 18,000 ISK for the sellers, 16,350 for the buyers. If you remember the last couple of years for test cultures, we were struggling to get to 10,000 ISK, and so this is a very, very impressive performance. If anyone has an explanation where all of this demand is coming from, what this is used for, in all likeliness, definitely let me know in the comments. Is this also tied to perhaps implant production? Test cultures might make sense. I'm not sure if it's in the mix somewhere, but this is very impressive. And then finally we got Whitmer mainframes that is just landing on its 2.1 average, but again, speculation happening here in the last couple of months. Is this gonna come out with a new structure? Will we see something interesting on that front? And now that we've got the trailer, we've got the info, so far it's a big no. So we're falling back to that 2.1 million for the buyers, less than 2.3 million for the sellers, landing on 2.1 million on average. So definitely some impatience here, some people dumping some of that advanced PI material stuff. After that, advanced moon materials coming in at 2630. Let's go through these. I'm gonna say hesitation, maybe some volatility as well, because who knows what these changes next week will do to the meta in 0.0, potentially to war in 0.0, and thus potentially to moon mining in 0.0 as well. Crystalline carbonite definitely shooting up from its 140 bottom here and going back to 160 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers, continuing its volatile period, although starting at a lower point but making it back to 160. It's pretty impressive all of a sudden, not really expected in my book. Ferrite carbide also going up in price here, 160 and above, 185 in fact for the sellers on a bit of a lack of supply, 150 for the buyers. Are people expecting trouble? It is definitely possible. Titanium carbide next, at least it's pulling away from the bottom, but this one has been much more stable for the construction of Caldari ships, 177 for the sellers, 164 for the buyers. Reasonable price, but also moving up all of a sudden. And then we've got tungsten carbide that is also moving up in the last week, albeit also pretty stable for the MR ships, 194 for the sellers, 175 for the buyers. Well, that's all carbides up in price all of a sudden. Let's see if this is the start of a trend, and if this is indeed due to the patch, then that should be confirmed in the upcoming weeks, of course. Let's take a look at the metamaterials next. Are they moving in tandem? Well, photonic metamaterials is definitely peaking up, 20,000 on the chart, 17,500 for the sellers, 16,000 for the buyers, coming from 15k. A nice increase in price here all of a sudden as well. Plasmonic metamaterials was already peaking and is able to maintain a price well above 20k. In fact, almost 25,000 for the sellers, 23,000 for the buyers. That is really impressive. And let's take a look. Ticker, did I buy the photonics? Yeah, I bought photonics for less than 15,000. And now I'm really curious, this personal. And yeah, 17,500. I could sell for a profit right now. Plasmonic going up as well. And then we get non-linear metamaterials staying pretty low here, but look at where we're coming from. 22,000 is actually the average for the last 6 months or so. 23,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers, up just a smudge, so not that bad. And then terahertz metamaterials also was above 20k, is at 21,000 and 20,000 for the buyers. So we're definitely seeing an uptrend here in a lot of the materials for some reason. I'm gonna gamble on the patch, and that should mean potentially even a better sell opportunity if the theory of the market is then confirmed in the upcoming weeks. Well, very interesting all of a sudden. Fermionic condensates also climbing back above 90,000 disk, 93,000 for the sellers, 85 for the buyers. Nice to see that upswing as well. Ferrogel, same thing, confirming its recovery back above 40k, 42,000 for the sellers, 40,500 for the buyers. So that seems to be sustained all of a sudden. Fullerites continuing a slow pull away from 1000 disk on the upside as well. 1100 now for the sellers. That's a 10% increase here. And first buyer coming in at 1100 as well. So people are apparently expecting trouble here. Hypersynaptic fibers went to 1-year low point. Now I really regret not buying a couple of weeks ago, buying for 10,000 and probably below that. 12,400 for the sellers, 11,700 for the buyers as well, up in price substantially. Nano transistors, look at that. From 6,000 and then all the way up to 7,000 here. Not bad, right? A sixth of the price increase, and buyers have moved in at 6,000 disk as well. Very impressive. Phenolic composites staying above average, not going up. So one exception, 2,000 for the sellers, 1,900 for the buyers. And then finally we get ceramic fibers, also slight uptrend, moving back to 400 disk. Yep, almost that for the sellers. Very interesting one actually, and you know, if this is indeed a sign of expectations in nullsec, that could mean that destruction and war is coming. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one, because this is coming a little bit as a surprise, but it is basically you know, interesting to think that this is expectation of lots of trouble coming to 0-0. I find this pretty interesting. Let's take a look at the impact on the Tech 2 ship market then. 3130. Especially because I still have those investments that I've been holding on to. Let's take a look at the ticker. I've got a Basilisk at 175, I've got a Cerberus at 195, Heretic at 52, and I actually tried to sell my stealth bombers. Is that still in here? Yeah, tried to sell my purifiers from 22 million bought at 32 million sold. 50% profit almost. That didn't look that bad. So let's take a look at these. Here is the Aries, flat at 30 million, very flat. So this is not that natural. Oversupplied a little bit, 30 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Don't want to sell here, don't want to buy here. That is unfortunate. But Basilisk next. Bought one for 175. Where are we at? 210 for the sellers, 189 for the first buyer, 173 for the next. So still in limbo for me. But of course, if advanced move materials is any indication, and if Morphite is any indication, we could go up in price. So I'm definitely not planning to sell too soon with these investments, and we're gonna have to watch low points like a hawk, I think, here. Next up, Cerberus, 195 purchase, 230 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. So already looking at like a pretty good spot, but look at the potential volatility here. Here again, I am going to be patient and wait for a better sell opportunity. Next up, we've got the Crow, and yeah, this one had a very weird data point last week, so this is gonna be a tougher chart to read. Look at that spike up to 40 million in March, not bad. We're still declining from that, I think. 31.5 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. Yeah, again, just like the Aries, don't want to sell here, don't want to buy here. After that we get the Guardian. A bit of pressure might just create the right opportunity. Keep in mind you have been able to buy these for less than 200 million in the past. 213 for the sellers, 188 for the first buyer, 187. There's definitely some competition here already, but you can buy Guardians for close to 190, which to me makes a lot of sense. So if you want in on that potential boom, and I'm thinking I'm gonna try, or do I still have something in trying to buy? I'm still trying to buy a Guardian at 184. That's too bad. I don't think, you know, you can see that competition is just below that 190 mark, not below that 185 anymore. So I was basically just too late to grab this one. I might just try and push it to like 189 and really try to still grab a Guardian. If there's one Tech 2 ship that could come back again, logistics becoming harder to do, maybe getting more losses here, it could be interesting. The Hawk going up in price very sharply. 57 million for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers. Whoever it was that asked me to put in the Hawk, very good choice. Look at that volume spike here all of a sudden. Must have something to do with the rebalancing. My thinking here is with the nerf to resistances, perhaps a passive Hawk becomes far more meta for the abyssal content, or are we expecting more destruction in the abyss as well, thus increasing demand sharply. This is an incredible sell opportunity and crazy volatility all of a sudden in a Gila, now I'm thinking I want to check the Gila as well all of a sudden, but in a, I think PvE centric ship, or maybe it has another use as well. Very interesting price spike and volume spike all of a sudden. Heretic still staying very flat, just not really making a comeback just yet. 65 million for the sellers, 56 for the buyers. So I bought at exactly the right time. I think it's again too early to sell. And the Hound is working its way back to 35 million ISK, 34 for the sellers, 26 for the buyers. You could still sell if you bought these for much less than 25 million here. Yeah, another spike that's actually sustaining itself at the moment. Then the Ishtar back at the lower end of the 230 million range, 230 for one seller, 220 for a buyer. Doesn't feel like something I want to be gambling into right now. Then we get the Manticore finally coming down. This could be interesting, right? A spike back to 40 million ISK, which is in line with the high points of the entire year. Low points below 25 million have been possible. Let's take a look at that. 34 million for the sellers, less than 30 million for the buyers. And if this this production overshoots, then, you know, Manticore could be in for a sell opportunity in the upcoming weeks. Definitely something to look at in the next weeks to see if this decline continues here. Now we've got the Munin. I think that one has been nerfed, if I'm not mistaken. 236 for the sellers, 218 for the buyers. Basically still on its average, not that interesting in my opinion. A Nemesis spike, very interesting all of a sudden. Oops, I made a mistake, sorry about that one. Selling for 36 million, a couple, 39 million for most, and then 24 million for the buyer. Still opening up a gap, but do I still have some? Nemesis, no I don't. Have I made trades in the Nemesis? Let's take a look at that. Yeah, so I bought for 24.5 and sold for 33. You are beating that by quite a margin already. And the buy price is actually still very close to that. So this is really interesting. Take your positions. Are you now selling your Nemesis, or are you trying to still buy some for 24 million? The response on this one is again going to be very interesting. Of course, this will not last very long, but will we see oversupply and potentially another overshoot? What's going to happen here? Very, very interesting to see that volatility in these stealth bombers come back. Then we get the Oneros staying above 200 billion on average, 213 for the sellers, 175 still for the buyers. But yeah, the volumes are really not great here. Then we get the Purifier staying at 35 million, 35 for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. Definitely something that you could sell if you bought, let's say, in mid-March for close to 25 or even below 25 million. Then we get the Saber that has a spike that's now recovering, went up to 75 million, down to 66, and the buyer still at 61. That is still very expensive in my opinion. Saber brawling ship, I think that its tech to ammo could be getting the right buffs here, could make that one a little bit more interesting, potentially be the reason for the spike. And then we get the scimitar back up to 230, 222 in fact for the seller. So that's the in-between place again. And then the Zarmast actually jumping up a little bit. I think some speculation happening that Tech 2 is indeed going to become more important because of its innate resistances. 320 million for the sellers, 286, 87 in fact for the buyers. Let's drink a little bit again because I'm starting to slowly lose my voice here. There we go. Yeah, I'm personally expecting higher prices for Tech 2 ships. The Guardian looks pretty interesting if you still want to try to grab something. That Hawk spike is very unexpected but super impressive as well. And the stealth bombers look set for some volatility as well. Let's move on to the Tech 3 ship market, coming in at 39.30, let's say. I can stall till then. There it is. Alright, Tech 3 ships. Let's take a look at that. The Confessor breaking out to 70 million ISK. Yeah, I think this will have just been an exacerbation of people expecting something bad, but it becoming very clear that innate resistances, so Tech 2, Tech 3 ships, also more options like speed tanking, the different modes and things like that will become more important. I think that the tactical destroyers are just gonna start to take over the meta, which is why the Confessor spikes to 88 million for the sellers, 67 million for the buyers. Man, I really regret not buying this dip at like 35 million or something like that. That is crazy. But the regular market dynamic between the destroyers is just gone because of this complete meta shift. Next up here we get the Hecate also shooting up to 80 million, 76 for the sellers, 68 for the buyers. That is very expensive. And we get the Jackdaw, an exception. Not really sure why. Now my thinking is maybe because there is gonna be like a brawler meta that CCP does want to promote. They said so in the dev blog. They're gonna increase like the Tech 2 ammo, I believe, the close range Tech 2 ammo. So the Hecate makes a lot of sense if you're gonna make it in a brawl. Speed is of the importance. Of course, the Hecate can use speed mode to try and close the distance, catch your target, and then get that brawler advantage with crazy damage. The Confessor may have something similar as well with the right fit, with the right weapon systems. And then the Jackdaw is still a kitey type of destroyer, of course. Shield fit, long range with the missiles. In sharpshooter mode, it's all about that range, and that may be the reason why this one is still only 50 million, which is still pretty damn expensive, but compared to the others, not that much, and 46 million for the buyers. I would say that that is very good news for the Care Bears that still want a good PvE option, because the Jackdaw is crazy good for PvE, in fact. So I really love that one, and I don't think you have the slots for that many resistance modules on this one either. It's gotta be about the speed, about getting so much capacitor, and then getting maybe an oversized shield wrapper to keep you going in PvE. So the Jackdaw, you know, nice to see that that one is still affordable compared to the Confessor and the Hecate. And then the Zwepel, I'm expecting a spike as well, because for short range stuff, I think you can make a Zwepel brawler fit. No, it's actually staying at 50 million. All right, 52 for the sellers, 44 for the buyers. Up to you to decide. Do you think that people may move into some short range Zwepels with that new ammo change? It could still be interesting to try and grab a couple, although you are of course moving in at 50 million, which is not as good as early March, of course, when I actually told you guys to buy some Zwepels. But anyways, on the tactical destroyer market, it's just over with the speculation, I think, because, well, this is just a new meta. This is just just a new level of demand, level of interest in the market, and we'll have to see if production is able to catch up or if demand will stay too strong here. And so we're talking completely different dynamics from the oversupply situation which we had like fall and early winter. Now we are basically in the everyone wants tactical destroyers. How will New Eden be able to ramp up production for these ships? It's gonna be super interesting, but completely impossible for me personally to predict. And that may be the reason why we have this bubble or this spike we've had as well in the cruiser. So here is the Legion chart, went up to 190 million, is now slowly going down. 160 for the sellers, 144 for the buyers. Bottoms has been 140, so those buyers get down there pretty quickly, just a couple more buy orders. And then if you're expecting that volatility to eventually come back here as well, look out for that buy opportunity. I'm really surprised at the ones that we're seeing here though. This is not a lot of ships, and it is crushing the price down from 190 down to 159 on just, what would that be, 30 legions or something like that. It does feel very, very crazy, but we now see this 3-4 monthly waves that do tend to happen. That could be interesting for people that want to speculate on the strategic cruiser market, especially now that the predictability in the tactical destroyer market is gone. The Loki is falling off a cliff all of a sudden, but went up to 350 million ISK. We've got to be honest here. I mean, double the price of most of the others, almost triple the price of something like a Proteus. That was very, very crazy, and we're talking 217 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. And here again, just look at the volumes here to crash that price down. It really doesn't take much. 173 for the buyers, 150 the bottom. Let's keep an eye on what happens here as well. The Proteus finally doing a little bit of a baby spike compared to the previous two. Went up to 180 million ISK, and it's already back down to 176. 150 for the buyers, bottom here 130. So yeah, look out for that tiny bit of supply. I mean, this is in the last 24 hours. There's 15 here, but everything else doesn't feel that out of line, just quickly crashing that price back down. And then the tank was actually up on the ticker, but spiked up to 250, and we are now at 195 for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. Bottom for the Tango is 150. So in the cruiser, tactical cruiser market, I'm seeing the spike ending, and then the real question is, will we see some oversupply, despite the fact that I'm really not seeing the numbers here, and potentially a buy opportunity? I think it could be interesting to give it a go with at least one hull or something like that on the next dip. We'll keep an eye on it. And then for the extra product this week, we're gonna take another look at the faction frigates. That's been a while. 46.5. Let's see. Oh, and I'm adding the Gila just out of interest for what's happening here. So let's take a look at that one first. Because of the announced nerf. Okay, no, we're not seeing that same hawk spike here. The Gila is going for around 200 million, 194 in fact for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Not that expensive all of a sudden, so I thought maybe some speculation on more Gila losses in the Abyss could have driven the price up, but that's not happening here, so that's probably not what's happening in the Hawk market. Let me know what's happening there. So that means we're going for the frigates, faction frigates. Let's start with the pirate factions, see what's happening here. The Astero is still at around 60 million ISK, slightly above average at 63, but coming from a spike in February, so it doesn't feel that crazy. Also could be increased demand, of course. Newer players want to get into exploration, get into a wormhole, get those relic sites there, pirate relic sites that can be very, very profitable. Something like the Astero with the bonuses to the hacking game and things like that. They can't necessarily use the cloaking device, but the rest of the bonuses might just be good enough to get a new player going on that wormhole exploration. So it makes sense to me that there's a bit more demand here. The Crewer is actually going up to 60 million ISK, 61 in fact for the sellers, 1 year high point, and the low point was 30 million. If you bought this in December at the low point, you get double your money. right now a nice opportunity to sell that one. The Daredevil is also up to 80 million. Perhaps, no, it's a slow upswing, so this has just become more expensive. 88 million for the Daredevil. Does that drop in Serpentis? Description. No, this is Angel Cartel. I mean, I would, in 3 out of 10, this BPC drops. So I would love to get some Angel Cartel stuff going at the moment. I find Succubus, if I'm not mistaken, around Detail. The Dramiel, still on an average 45 million, so this one is not that expensive. It is expensive at the moment at 47 million, but for such a fast ship, this feels very reasonable. The Garmer is also at the high end at 60 million ISK. Here is my Succubus. Oof, that was a spike up to 100 million. All of a sudden, we have recovered from that. We're now at 71 million, which is still a great price. So I should get back out there and try to hunt for some blueprints for this one. And then finally the Worm is staying at 65 million, still pretty expensive. So just like the Tech 2 ships, I think are going to be a little bit more expensive. Looks like faction, pirate faction stuff is also pretty expensive at the moment. Let's take a look at the Navy faction ships then. We've got the Caldari Navy hook bill, very, very stable, just below 12.5 million, 12.2 for the sellers, 10 million, plenty of supply, not a lot of demand here. There's not much to say here. Trend-wise, Federation Navy Comet, basically inexpensive. Looking at this full chart here, 12 million for the sellers, 10.7 million for the buyers. Super narrow margin here. Plenty of supply again, not that much demand. So I'm not gonna say Caldari Navy hook bill is expensive. This one is inexpensive. It's weird. This one might be inexpensive right now, but unless you're in the know in faction warfare, this is a very difficult chart to read. Imperial Navy Slicer feels like it's been recovering a little bit, goes up to 15 million ISK, which is not that expensive. Republic Fleet Firetail at the down low end, but still 10 million, less than 9 million for the sellers. All right, if you want to gamble on the Minmatar coming back, then this could be a buy opportunity. Crucifier Navy issue up to 20 million ISK here, almost 19 million for the sellers. Not a lot of demand though, so this is making it very difficult to really be trading in this. Griffin Navy issue up to 15 million, slightly going down. Maulus is currently going up from a very pronounced one-year low point. We went to 10 million, so we could have probably bought these for less than 10 million right here in mid-March. Now we're resurging to 19 million, but this doesn't feel like a faction warfare wave. This feels like maybe a market mistake wave, real oversupply, 1 year very pronounced low point. Here buying this, if you're looking at this market, makes a lot of sense, and now you've got your profit. And now we get the Vigil Fleet issue that's staying at 15 million. Not easy to make a lot of ISK on this one. So this is very interesting to me in the sense that CCP has already announced that they're nerfing the PvE aspect of faction warfare in the LP payout, and so it really looks like that predictability which existed in the last couple of years was really cool to look at. I never really took enough time to be super active in that, but it feels like that's lost a little bit, and that we have to go back to the basics, like here the Maulus completely breaking the trend, going down to 10 million on the chart, which is a very pronounced 1 year low point. If you'd bought this, you would have doubled your money potentially right now, but you'd no longer have to really only count on what's happening in faction warfare. Okay, those guys are winning out, that should be loss of LP, we should see a crashing price by now. No, it's more about keeping an eye on the actual 1 year low points, because very, very stable. You know, you'd think there'd be more swings in faction warfare than this, and it's maybe also because it's the frigates, of course, smallest, easiest to get, things like that. I understand that, but it used to be a predictor, and right now it's all about just reading the market correctly from a more general perspective. I think we'll keep an eye on this in the upcoming weeks as well, see if we can maybe spot a ship that still shows those faction warfare trends, but it's really starting to feel like those days are over. And that's gonna be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.